Hi, Dad. Story time?
Is that? Now, where were we?
King Ridley was about to climb the tower to rescue Princess Talia from evil Queen Ned.
Wait. No spoilers.
Dad, you've read this like 100 times.
That doesn't mean that the ending couldn't miraculously change.
Welcome, everyone, to what I think is a very special episode of the Positively Trek Book Club. And it's special for a couple of reasons. It's special because we have a new Star Trek release, and that means we get to speak with an author, which is always a fun time and always something I really look forward to. But we also have the return of the prodigal co-host. We have Bruce Gibson returning. Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, you thought you could get rid of me, but of course, I can always come back.
The seat is always open for you, so really thrilled to have you here. Really excited that you contacted me wanting to do this episode for this new release, the first novel in the Star Trek Strange New Worlds banner, and written by John Jackson Miller, and we are so thrilled to have him back on the show as well. John, welcome back to Positively Trek.
Glad to be here on your very special episode, although very special episode in TV land means we're going to be talking about it'll be an episode where I'm going to have to come to grips with my shoplifting or something else like that. One of those episodes of the old sitcoms where they'll drop out the laugh track for most of the time so that we can and we'll have a phone number at the end saying if you want to learn more.
It's either that or like a beloved secondary character dies or something like that. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, or goes to prison for reckless driving or something like that, and then we'll talk about it's amusing because I was I was at Great Lakes Comic-Con in Detroit, and I got to spend a lot of time with Dan DiDio, who is he was I guess editor-in-chief or something like that at DC Comics. But we spent most of the time talking about his time at ABC, where he was in daytime programming for a while. And he was involved with the very last ABC After School special, and which is every single one of those was a very special episode.
Well, I still think this qualifies as a very special episode because one thing that has been rare lately, at least few and far between, is new Star Trek novel releases. And we do have one to talk about. Like I said, the first Star Trek Strange New Worlds novel, The High Country, and beautiful hardcover edition it's come out in. And everybody, I hope you've picked up your copy and have read through it. We'll start out spoiler-free, but we'll get into spoilers later, and we'll give you ample warning, but there will be spoilers. So this episode best consumed having read the book. So let's launch right into it. This, of course, not a spoiler to say, it's Strange New Worlds. It involves Pike and the crew of the Enterprise. And this is, even though it's the first Strange New Worlds novel, it's your second Christopher Pike novel.
It is. We had a proto Strange New Worlds novel in Star Trek Discovery, The Enterprise War, which was the first novel where it was written where anybody who was working on the book had actually seen, Anson Mount had actually seen, what they were doing with Spock and Number One in Discovery. And so this got to be a return to that. And in some measure, this book is I don't want to say it's the reverse of that novel, but that novel was mostly spent in space. And a lot of time on board Enterprise, and a lot of time in physical combat for absolute certain, and space combat and that sort of thing. And I wanted to do a book here where it was the opposite of that. I go back to my very first Star Trek novel, Takedown, where I got to the end of the book and I realized they hadn't set foot on a planet in the entire book. This is Strange New Worlds, so there obviously should be Strange New Worlds. Again, I looked at what I had recently done. I had done the Discovery novel Die Standing, which did have some world building in it. I had a region of space with 3 planets with triangular trade and very unusual alien life forms living there. And but I didn't spend the entire book in any one of those places. When I was asked to write the novel by Kirsten Beyer and Margaret Clark, I said, what I really want to do is do a seriously deep dive on a single planet, one planet, many worlds, one planet, many cultures, one planet, many secrets. I want to do the kind of story where, you don't have to think about the first contact and then the second contact and then the third contact. I want the crew to be there for a significant period of time where they have to live with their decisions, and they have to live with whatever, they end up wreaking on this planet just by their very presence. And so that was kind of partially the starting point. The other thing is I knew I was going to put Pike on a horse. I think I had the High Country title immediately, in the tradition of other westerns, like the Big Country and Ride the High Country. That's one that didn't actually use the full High Country phrase, but I'm like, okay, I want something where the fact that this is on a planet and we're trying to get back to space, and we're also trying to maintain our Federation and our personal principles at the same time. That's one of the other high countries in here. There's where things get kicked off at.
When you did Enterprise War, it was before Strange New Worlds premiered. So you created some characters for the Enterprise, and now we know who the bridge crew is with Strange New Worlds. Even though this novel takes place mostly on a planet, there are some scenes on the Enterprise. Are there some characters you brought over from that other novel into this?
We mentioned Galagian. He's not on the ship, but he was one of the revolving door of engineers that we've got on this spaceship. And so he comes up very early. There are two other members of engineering, Galka and I think Jallo, who were in Enterprise War as well. That we brought them in. One of the tricks is, every time the ship goes back to port, it seems to have new people on it. So, one of the things, if people go back and listen to my episodes about Enterprise War, back in that time frame, we were basing it on just what we could see about the Enterprise in the snippets of Discovery where we could actually see the ship. And one of the things that I had determined, I actually have I was keeping a cheat sheet of who was in what chair and who was in what chair, and also who had been in what chair over time. One of the things that I realized was that, at least as of Discovery season 2, this was a really top-heavy command structure on Enterprise, and that wouldn't stay the same. Because we had 2-3 commanders or lieutenant commanders or something like that at that point. By the time we get to the High Country, the structure of the command structure aboard the ship is much different. And we have a number of people who have cycled off clearly because either we haven't seen them and they're just off shift, or they're gone. So I wasn't going to, for example, some of the people that were helming the ship in Enterprise War, I wasn't going to unilaterally say that they had left. I wasn't going to unilaterally say that they were still aboard the ship just because we have not seen them in any of the 10 episodes that came out during the first season. For all I know, they're there, and for all I know, they went off and went into the private sector somewhere. I don't know. So I was very careful that the only characters that I brought back were the ones that I had created.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that bit of connective tissue between those two novels. And also, I really appreciate the fact that this novel is a little bit different than most of the modern Star Trek novels, with the exception of the TOS novels, in that Strange New Worlds kind of lends itself to that more traditional style of Star Trek storytelling. You can put a story in the middle of season 1 without worrying too much about them, being in the middle of,
Right.
of chasing the Red Angel or some other big, huge overarching story going on. But at the same time, there are very specific kind of changes that happen throughout the season. So you did pick a very specific point to place this story. And I was wondering how you came to that decision, why you placed the story there.
One part of it was Kirsten Beyer, in discussions with her. Kirsten, the executive producer of the series, who I speak with in doing all the streaming books. She said, okay, this guy Hemmer, the actor Bruce Horak, does just a wonderful job here. If there's any way we can get him into this book, that's great. Well, obviously that constrains where I can put the book, at least where I can put any part that he's in. I was kind of cagey most of the year as far as when it came to when this book is set, in part because I didn't want to give away what happens to that character for anybody who hasn't seen it. But also, it's we don't make it particularly clear. It's not necessarily the case that the entire book is set during season 1. There are a number of epilogues that could be at some point much later on. And so that kind of gave me the cover to say, well, we don't know. It could be more than one in more than one time. But so we had that. And then I decided, because of the nature of the threat to Enterprise's systems and that we come up with in this book, this baffle that is affecting electrical systems. Well, I said, okay, well, I'm missing a bet if I don't have this during the time that Dr. Mabenga is, storing, for want of a better term, his child aboard the ship in the systems. I wanted to have something breaking in the sense of slowing down, breaking their impulse to try to go back and save the people on the planet no matter what, to save their crew on the planet no matter what. I needed somebody on the ship who was going to say, no, please, let's just stay right here. Let's not get any nearer to this thing. And as it turns out, Mabenga makes the right call, because Enterprise would not have gotten out of this situation.
Yeah, I almost want to comment more on that, but we'll get into that into the spoilers. But I'm just curious too, because you wrote this. I think it was about this time a year ago or something. It was before Strange New Worlds debuted on screen. How much did you see at that point, or did you just read scripts?
I do not reveal sources and methods.
Oh,
It's basic, basic tradecraft, as they say in the spy world. Ask me about it 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I'll say, yeah, we got this, we got that, we got the other thing. When we're in NDA land, I tend to abide by that stuff even after everybody knows what's been on screen, and in particular when it has to do with the methods or things that they actually will provide. Much later I'll say, Star Wars Rebels, they gave me the story Bible for season 1. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I read the script in the vice president of Lucasfilm's conference room. But these are things that are significantly years on, and nobody is going to use that information to start quizzing me about everything else in the world.
Yeah. Well, and it wouldn't be all that difficult, in the fact that you are familiar with some of these characters like Pike, Spock, Number One, the Enterprise.
I do that all the time.
So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch, but you decided to go the route of doing a Western in this one. And I remember when I saw you at Star Trek Mission Chicago, you were telling me how you like to do a different type of book. Like, one book's about this and you wanted to do a Western. So why did you choose a Western?
Well, actually, the book I had turned it in by that point, but my editor had not, I don't know that she had finished reading it yet or not. I think maybe she had. But what she said to me has become my catchphrase about this book. It's not a Western. It's a science fiction novel with horses in it. And I believe that that's true, because there is a real, scientific conundrum that we hit these people with. We wrap around it a very Star Trekky, moral conundrum having to do with the Prime Directive and everything else. It's not just a Western. There are other, kind of genres we touch on in here because of the nature of what I have happening on this planet. I got really interested after doing the Rogue Elements novel. Rogue Elements, of course, has a significant tie, no spoilers because it's on the back cover, to Piece of the Action, which is the novel about, or not the novel, but the episode about, if you want to boil it down to specifically the science fiction thing that it is, it's cultural contamination. An artifact from Earth is left on the planet and everybody starts acting like that. Well, and that there's an entire kind of Star Trek episode that is like that. There are a bunch of those. This one has to do with displacement. It has to do with people who are transplanted and why that might be and what the motive might be and what happens next. As I say in the acknowledgments, it wasn't immediately the case because when they offered me the book, it was about a week before I went back to my first comics, science fiction, anything convention. This is the summer of 2021. And I am very first day at a convention. I'm not even there at the convention yet. It's the night before. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina for GalaxyCon Raleigh, which I'm doing again this year. And I get the call from home that there's a terrible storm in Wisconsin. The back wall of our basement in our farmhouse that was built in 1853 is caving in because of all the erosion and all the water and everything is happening. And the result of what happened to us is we actually had to have the house lifted off the ground so they could replace the basement. And we had to decamp to a hotel for a week in the middle of this. I'm writing the outline for this book during that week. And so I'm really thinking about, okay, what happens if, Wizard of Oz style, you get taken away and taken someplace else. And you only have what you can carry with you or what you had on you at the time. And then, how would that work? I thought about, well, how is it that these cultures that are transplanted elsewhere still look like the cultures they once were? What if there's actually some sort of a system that is designed to try to keep them down on the farm, for want of a better term, or keep them whatever they happen to be doing when they entered our story or entered the continuity. And I didn't arrive at that immediately. And I will say that I went through a couple of outlines. In each successive outline, the story got far less violent because I began thinking, well, I wouldn't have a clash of cultures on this planet. I'd have these cultures getting along famously. Because again, there's a mind involved here. There's planning involved here, and in particular, before that last outline, I had a conversation again with online with Kirsten, where she had said, this is a chance. Maybe we can do a utopia story where it's not failed, where it's still working for a number of people. And around the same time, I had also seen a tweet from Anson Mount, who does read science fiction, and he says he was kind of tired of seeing stories about failed utopias and monarchies. And I have both a utopia and a monarchy, and I tried to subvert people's expectations about the monarchy and also about the utopia. It is the case that for most people, the predicament they're in, the system that they're under, is still functioning. And it throws onto particularly Pike and Spock, who are the first ones to really grapple with what's going on. This debate. They have a debate at one point in the book where it's actually Pike who's like, I don't think we can do anything. We may have to stay here. That's fun. That allowed me to go back into, there was another episode, New Eden, which was in Discovery, which was a similar kind of a situation where in that case, that was there had been a number of issues that there'd been both physical transplantation of peoples and then also cultural contamination at the same time. This is all fun stuff to whip on people that have never really had to deal with the Prime Directive under that name. And the Prime Directive is less than a year old as of this book. General Order 1 existed, and I went back and dug through some of the really, really, really old books that had full listings of what was in General Order 1, so that they could actually get into debates with one another about this line in this allows us to act. But Pike is throughout this book. Pike is going, okay, I don't know what I can do here. Una Chin Riley is going as well. I can't even reveal who and what I am for a good section of the book to the people who live on this planet.
Yeah, there's a ton going on in this book. I think this is probably a really good time to take a quick break. When we come back from the break, we will be getting into spoilers with this book, diving deep into what's going on. So this novel, I like, Bruce, you put here in the notes, cowboys and aliens. I definitely kind of had that thought as well. And when I was reading this book, I kept thinking, like, I'm not the biggest fan of the genre. I don't know a ton about it, but steampunk kept going through my head. But then I realized it's steampunk, but without the steam. Like, they can't even have that.
Yep. Both hands tied behind their backs. I mean, it's steampunk where everybody's afraid of fire.
Exactly. Which I thought was a really fun thing to play with. The fact that this society, or really this series of societies, being held intentionally in stasis by what is at various times in the novel to be believed to be a natural aspect of the planet, the machinations of the Skagarans, or something else completely different. This kind of idea of fear of technology and the juxtaposition of that against the advancement through technology and what that can bring. That's always been a very common theme in Star Trek. That's something we see a lot in the original series, a lot in modern Star Trek as well. What about that subject kind of attracted you to telling this story?
Well, it feeds into Pike, and the fact that he likes, he likes the horses. He likes the simple life. He likes ranching, and yet he also enjoys being in space and all of this. What is it that he likes about these things? Why is it that the Captain Kirk is raising horses, besides the fact that William Shatner has an interest there? I also noticed that right there in New Eden, there's the mention that I think a Wasakan, or however you pronounce her name, comes from a Luddite colony. And I was like, okay, cool. I got a Luddite colony. It's only natural there would be a Luddite colony in California, because there's got to be every kind of colony in California. And I'm thinking, well, what if this is not some long lost love we've never heard of, but it's still somebody pretty important. It is that we find on this planet. It's the person who introduced him to this life, the rustic life and the appeals of it, and can sort of be part of the siren song, saying, okay, I know you think you're going to leave this planet, but you might have to be stuck here. And would that be so bad? It's more complicated than that ultimately. But Pike knows that he's got this responsibility in space he's got to get back to. I wanted to really tangle with this notion of what if you had a force that was keeping people in this state of grace, more or less, untainted by technology. There are certainly other Star Trek episodes. There's I know there's one not very good original series episode where it's the space hippies or whatever you want to call it. That I don't even remember the name of the episode, but it's very, very late in the third season, I think. I realized, okay, I can actually do something with this culture that's involved here. The Skagarans were in it from the beginning because I was never satisfied with the answers that we got in that episode, because I could not see why you would bring laborers from another planet. You'd go out of business very quickly doing that. It seems like there's a lot of ways to do that differently. So I thought, well, what if there was another motive? What if there was another motive? What if our understanding of that episode is not the actual fact? And then I thought, well, let me give some texture to the people that are involved in this. And that gets us into, as I say, this monarchy, which you can't really tell is a monarchy. They're trying to be as benevolent as they possibly can be. We're thinking of you. We're thinking of everybody. We're not really profiting from, this place. We're not abusing the system. You definitely get the impression that everybody who is in the position that Draco is in has been miserable. That this job has taken over their lives, and that it is just kick the heck out of them. And I wanted to do to show that contrast in the family with Solarius, and of course Solarius ends up being our connection to another one of my novels. That is Rogue Elements, because we find out about the Solarius front in Rogue Elements. Which many people will probably not have caught yet, but it is in Rogue Elements. The Solarius front is acting against the Silvus Project. The Silvus Project is remodeling worlds and transplanting species and transplanting plants and biomes and things like that. And the Solarius front, we are told, we don't see much of them other than they're mentioned as a nemesis. They're described as an activist group that very, very, very much doesn't like the idea of transplanting anything from anywhere to anywhere. And
right.
I'm like, okay, well, that's you don't need that other piece of additional information to understand that, but that's one of the fun kind of things you can do. And I got some inspiration from that.
I love that. I'm gonna have to reread Rogue Elements now. That's amazing. I do vaguely remember that now. That's wonderful. I love that.
I know. I wasn't expecting that. You blew my mind on that. I was like, I gotta go look that up.
Well, I mean, there's a dice standing thing in there too because of the Viridian patch. I mean, that was a Section 31 / Federation Security Bureau specialty. The Admiral we see in Discovery had used that material to keep tabs on Finnegan. And I said, well, maybe Cornwell gifts that to Pike, because I wanted Pike to eventually be able to communicate, even if all he could say is stay away. But it's like, okay, that would be a very easy device to create, and it would not be something that would be thwarted by this dynamic that's going on the planet.
Yeah, it was interesting how Pike's trying to communicate to the Enterprise by sending a message, by, reconstructing, putting that house kind of back together with these patterns and stuff. And I love how he called the Giorgio thing, making the Delta symbol, like in the beginning of Enterprise. But, and then how the Enterprise is sending things down by like parachute and stuff. It's interesting to watch them try to work through this process of not having to use technology and try to do things old-fashioned ways.
It was a lot of fun, and if you actually get out your magnifying glass and look at the first map, which is the map from the little girl, and I say orbital enhancement superimposed. If you look closely at the mill, the roof of it has the exact design that is seen by the Enterprise crew. Again, it was just a fun little thing to add, just like the maps themselves were a fun little thing to add. And those only came about because of the supply chain problem and the fact that the book had to be delayed 3 months. I said, let's give people something extra. And I have this material, and I work with my friend James Mishler, who is a game designer, and he and I have worked on a number of things. He and I co-wrote a book that, or a comic book that releases from Dark Horse here the first week of March, called Skull and Bones, which is a pirate ship video game by Ubisoft that's coming up later sometime. I'm not sure exactly when the video game is coming out, but our comic is coming out first. But he's very much into games, and he's designed many maps. And I said, I don't need you to design a map. I need you to help me take the 15 maps that I've got and figure out how do we winnow this information down into something that I can present in just 4 or 5 maps in there. And again, I think it's a fun thing. I did the maps in a book called Lost Tribe of the Sith for Star Wars. And people still ask me about that because it's fun stuff.
So did you draw all the maps in this book and in Lost Tribes of the Sith too? Or
well, in Lost Tribe of the Sith, that was a funny story, because I had gotten my maps ready to go, or not ready to go. I'd gotten my maps done during the book, and I asked the editor, Shelley Shapiro. I said, can we put maps in the book? And she said, John, do you know who I am? She used to do. She was the assistant for Judy Lynn and Lester Del Rey. So she did all of the maps for all of the Del Rey titles, and also did maps for the Tolkien estate that would show up in the later books for the Middle Earth. She didn't do the maps for that book. That came from a hybrid of me and the Random House art department. With this. We brought in a software called Incarnate Pro, which, again, if you're designing games or if you're designing role-playing games, this is kind of what you're using these days. And then it was a matter of, like I said, getting it all to fit, because there's the three final maps connect, but they don't connect 1-1-1. They're actually like 1-1-1, because we're going northwest the whole time, which is not something I can communicate via audio very well. But
yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the maps. I remember messaging you, and I'm like, I'll go back and look at the maps after I read each section. You're like, that's the right idea, because you don't really appreciate until you know what's going on.
It was something where I had to do an additional read of the book. Because you do other reads for proofreading and whatever. I had to do a geographical read to make sure that everything, because in large measure, a lot of the stuff that I'd scribbled down was, this location is northwest of that one. This location is on the same river with this. So it was a matter of, can we get it all to fit, and then find a place to use it. It's fun. I don't know that it was something that would necessarily be done again. The nature of the book meant that the maps could be of a different style. If anybody is coming in hearing maps and thinking that these are going to be, something like you see out of the Star Trek, star charts, or the various Atlas products, it's not going to look like it's in an LCARS display. These are artifacts that people actually got. I mean, the first map is the map that Jenny drew for Pike, saying, "Hey, if you're looking to try to get to where Lila lives, you go that way."
Yeah, that was something that I found a lot of fun. Like, I remember being really young, reading Lord of the Rings and flipping back to the map every, 2 paragraphs. And in this one, very similar situation. You talk about a little peninsula that looks like the boot of Italy, and I'm flipping back. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I see. It's so thrilling. I really enjoy that stuff. So
yeah. And so, I mean, you remember that stuff. You remember that stuff. And it's, as I say, it's not necessarily the case that it will ever be done again. But, my whole thing is, if we're going to charge people for the hardcovers, I like to give them something extra if I can.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'm really going to remember about this book, it kind of blew me away because I was expecting it all to be, in the Old West type of scenario, is when we got these Vulcans on these big 15th century
Yes.
ships. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's like we're on the end of the earth and here come these Vulcans on these ships. And I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, Kirsten and I were discussing, this, in our email exchanges, and I freely admit I'm about the big moment, the big reveal, the big wow, isn't that cool? And that comes from my comic book days, I'm sure. Flip the page over and boom, there it is. The big display of the ships. It is true that at the same time I was doing this, James and I were doing the work on Skull and Bones, so I had ships on the brain, but that would actually come later. I already knew I was going to include the ships in there, and again, amid all my other shelves of reference materials and my own stuff and everybody else's, I mean, there's an entire shelf back here which is just Horatio Hornblower and Richard O'Brien and stuff having to do with 18th century Navy. I knew that I did not know enough about that world, even having read all those books, to do this story in reverse. One of the decisions that I made as we were winnowing down, initially there were many more characters stuck on the planet. We winnowed it down to we just got 4, and then we decided let's show you what's going on with 3 of them, and let's not show what's happening with Spock until he can be part of the big reveal. If we had shown that whole sequence, it would have been a much more congested book to try to write. We would have gone a lot longer without seeing Uhura or seeing Una Chin Riley, whose name we had to deal with in this book because when I wrote it, she was Una, and then Chin Riley got added to the conversation, and we realized, okay, well, you can't have her called by her first name by other officers as Commander Una. That's no longer her name. Our books are, for second reference of officers, it's the last name, it's a surname. But yeah, if we had included Spock's whole situation in there from the beginning, and there had been a lot more nautical stuff, first it would have dulled the surprise. And also, I would have had to have looked up just as much stuff about the ships as I had to look up about the living in the 19th century among horses. And I had many advisors on this book. I'll say that, both technical, scientific. My good friend Beth Canan, who is she is an expert when it comes to bloodlines of horses, and I discussed what would be the genetic situation on this planet, because they would only have whatever horses came in with the abductors, the abductions. They would only have the dogs that came in with the abductions. They would only have the insects that came in with the abductions. One of the things that I decided to do was imply that there were multiple human colonies, and we would only, in some cases, get to see a little of them. There's clearly an Asian colony somewhere on this planet. We see the buildings, we see the ships, and it's clearly from an earlier time. It's clearly from the 15th century or 14th century. And that tells you the span of this project. That kind of gives you the notion that, yeah, there's more population from Earth on this planet than just this one group of people that Pike meets.
I really appreciated so many aspects of this story. And just to go back to something you said, I really appreciate that decision to hold that surprise, because one thing you do is the chapters are very short, but they make you immediately want to flip and read the next chapter, because that first reveal, there's a flag with like a circle and a triangle on it. And I was like, what could that mean? Flip the next page and I'm like, Oh, Vulcans! That's amazing. That reveal, that's so good.
That particular one, and also, yeah, there's a lot of Star Trek Enterprise in this book, because of course we have the horses. North Star was kind of a pain because they never named the planet. And so I had to deal with that. I had in the episode, so I had to try to write around it somehow. But no, we have the fact that the Vulcans are your refugees from the Vulcan Andorian political crisis. So we have that element there, and then we have Hemmer, who brings in on his own, some elements. Just the notion that there are, these sort of, Alan Dean Foster had a book called Ice Rigger, which was about a fortress on skis. Well, that could give us another big reveal. That's I didn't get the idea from Foster. I actually was, when I was Googling what to call the ship, I knew what the word was in Enterprise, but I was just like, oh, okay, what should we call this thing? And of course, no one has ever come up with anything completely brand new in the universe. But this notion that we could give Hemmer a moment in this book where he gets a chance to do something that he always dreamed of doing, and have it be relevant and important, and have it be possible because they just happen to be, surrounded by the greatest craftspeople for this kind of work. And then we have the confrontations. And a thing about the confrontations is, now that we're here in no spoiler territory, absolutely nobody dies in this book. I think that is important because it allows us not to totally demonize the Skagarans in this. Some of them are trapped by their own culture and history and what they feel is a responsibility to the people on this planet, but they also have this inborn hostility to turning their own world into what happened to or turning this planet into what happened to their own world years and years ago. To a degree, they are sincere. It's just once people are ready to move on, the fact that the books that the Menders have are we're talking about bookcases deep of rules and regulations relating to things that they're not allowed to do because these are not original to the original culture. I worked to come up with some things that were just peculiar, like how lassos were tied. That really, spoke to me like bureaucracy gone mad. But people are familiar with that. There are things in European Union rules about how you can name a cheese. There are small little things like that in just about every walk of life. And so I come into these things trying to tell an adventure, but also let's light up people's imaginations a bit.
Well, I was wanting to ask a little bit about the section of the book with Uhura and her connection with the empatherms, and in particular this one empatherm, or Sari as they're called, that she names MP. And I have to imagine those parts of the book were really fun to write because they were really fun to read.
They were. What's the best thing you could do with somebody whose job is talking? Give them no one to talk to. Give them, or where their skill is communicating. Give them someone with whom they cannot communicate. And she realizes over the course of this, that there is an intelligence here, and that there is a communication that she can do. It takes a trial and error, and she has moments where she succumbs to despair. This allowed me to also dig into the new continuity that they came up with, or I guess nothing is new continuity. It's just unrevealed history. Having to do with her parents and the shuttle crash. And, that allowed me to, throw a little nervousness about her situation here. And yeah, I as I perceived it, I have Pike in his element, encountering a face from the past. I have Una trying to play detective, investigating this culture that she has been brought into by essentially Grizzly Adams, who turns out to clean up nice. And so she goes to the seat of power, and then Uhura is just really on her own, and only has vague direction to where she's headed. And the fact that they gave me Kirsten said I could have a month or so of the character's time. That was meaningful, because that meant that I could get the wagon train and the ships, and then the ice sled across a significant piece of territory, and then the airships are in the mix as well. This is one of those things where I'm also having to deal with the planetary conditions in terms of the seasons change fast and the planet tilts quickly, the axial tilt, all of these things that allow me to give you a summer, not a summer, but an autumn and a winter within the same month. And of course, they're also traveling as well. So, but no, I sweat these kind of details. And again, this is where the people who help me, I would use various people as sounding boards, including Dr. Don Lincoln, who has a nonfiction book out today. He's a senior scientist at Fermi Lab. I knew what I wanted the Baffle to do, and he gave me some suggestions as to how it could actually be doing it. As he said, nothing that would stand up to any particle physicist wanting to poke holes in it, but it would be good enough for Star Trek. And he and I are actually doing a panel at C2E2 on the science of Star Trek, just him and me.
Oh, very cool. I appreciated those acknowledgments. I liked the little bit of the delve into that. And you mentioned the wagon train. I just really got to quickly mention my absolute favorite nudge, nudge, wink, wink to the reader, which was the guy yelling out, "It's a wagon train to outer space." And Pike says, "Well, that's not how I would have put it, but okay."
I have been told before that I can't be, on the nose on this stuff. And so that was where I went with it immediately the first time. No, there had been a line in Takedown, not to get into too many spoilers for people who haven't read it, but basically Riker is transformed into a higher being in Takedown, and there's a sequence where Picard and Worf are pretending to be also similarly transformed. And I had originally had Picard say, "We are no longer the people you once knew. We are no longer human and Klingon." And I had Worf saying something along the lines of, "Yes, we're the next generation." And Margaret Clark wrote back in the notes, "You are not getting away with that." And so that went to the cutting room floor. But I figured, okay, yeah, I could do a sideways nudge. There was a moment at which I considered maybe not the name of the book, because I always loved High Country, but I was kicking around putting it on the back cover as the line at the top, instead of, I think it's Across the Lawless Frontier, which gets lawless. Physical law is not in an operation, and it gets frontier in there as well, which means a bunch of things in Star Trek. So I think that's what I went with. There was also already a novel with the title Wagon Train to the Stars eons ago.
I feel like if Braga and Moore can get away with Zephyr Cochrane saying you're all astronauts on some kind of Star Trek, all bets are off at that.
Well, he if any character can do that, it's Cochrane. Give him that. I needed to have a wagon train. There was nothing else to use but a wagon train. But I had so much fun. You mentioned, coming up with the ideas of, what can the Menders do to defend themselves? What can the Enterprise do to help? from above, the widgets and the gadgets and the things, using clockwork instead of, timers or anything like that, using chemical decay rates, things that would not be interfered with. Dry ice is in the mix at some point. Things that could not be interfered with by the baffle that's on this planet. Underneath it all, and I think there's got to be a heart to the book, and the heart to this book is really got to be, it's Pike and Lila, because he's got to help his friend through what he realizes. She didn't come here because she desperately wanted to go out to space, was searching necessarily for something like this. She's got significant issues, which I was able to tie back into the events of the TV show. At the end of this book, it's not necessarily the case that anyone necessarily loses. I get the sense that even Draco is relieved to be done, and yeah, he's griping about where he is at the end here, but this isn't like Rogue Elements where somebody winds up in prison after this. This is I very much assume that he will be chastised and find some place to be, but it just won't be in this business anymore. It won't be in the family business. And again, Lila, I mean, it ends with her and the Vulcans. I felt it was very important. One of the things about writing these very long books relative to the other novels, because these are my last two novels have been about 30% longer than the usual Star Trek novel. In each of them, I've done several, not necessarily epilogues, but I've shown what happened to everybody. Because I feel that if you've been along with me for the ride for this entire time, I don't want to wrap up anybody who's had a significant arc in a sentence. I want her to have a moment. I want the settlers to have a moment who are this book is about them to a degree. I want the Vulcans to have a moment. The Skagarans have a moment. I enjoyed being able to do that, and they give me the freedom to be able to do that. Now I got to say, thanks to the paper shortage, I probably would not be writing a very, 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 very long book again if I had known, because it's like if the book had been like 50,000 words shorter, maybe it would have come out in November. I don't know. But as it was, it is actually 50,000 words longer than Takedown was. So it's an epic, but I intended for it to be an epic.
Well, I notice, and I'm assuming this is because of the paper shortage as well, the font size was slightly smaller. You kind of had to.
Oh yeah, it's a shorter page count than Rogue Elements, even though the book is slightly longer. They have standard different fonts that they go to at different sizes. What happened was, you mentioned Bruce being in Chicago announcing this book. This is kind of like a 1-2 punch. We announced the book. We get the cover only 8 hours after the event where we announced the book. And then 1 week after that is when the word comes to me at another convention in Indianapolis that everything has been pushed forward 3 months. Didn't matter what it was all pushed forward. And I was like, wow. It's much less fun coming out in February than it is in November, in part because, no Christmas season, but also, right now I'm running around. I did the book launch in Madison the day it came out, Madison, Wisconsin. It was a 4-hour drive back during a 2-hour, what would normally be a 2-hour drive because of snow, the snowstorm that hit. And I, just came back from Detroit, and I basically snuck that trip in between a snowstorm here and an ice storm there. I'm heading to, and we've had a horrible ice storm today, and in 2 days I'm heading to Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, and likewise It looks like the weather will hold, but yeah, I would much rather be launching it. But this is a reason that they don't launch books in the winter. It's hard to do this sort of thing. On the other hand, there's less competition out there, so I'm seeing the book actually in the front area of some stores, which is kind of cool.
See, I love your life adventures because I know it could inspire the next Star Trek novel.
Being stuck in a spaceport. Yes, that will be it.
Well, I mean, all that's left for me to say is I really enjoyed this novel. I highly recommend it. And as I often say at the end of these, if you've listened to this whole thing without reading this novel, I question your life choices, but you can turn it around, go buy this novel, read it. We've talked about a lot that's in this novel, but we haven't even really hit on nearly everything. So there's still a lot to be enjoyed in here, and a lot of fun surprises and really cool stuff. So I think I don't have more fun reading anyone else's novels than yours. Like, I can definitely say that. Like, I always just really enjoy the process of reading it because there's always just fun little things to consume in them.
Well, thanks. I write every one of these things as if it's the last one I'll do. And I have been fortunate that it's not the last one I do ever. I might as well swing for the fences. I might as well do what I'm going to do. I might as well see what I can do here because, if I'm going to spend 3-4 months, just writing the manuscript, I need to really be in love with the story myself. I need to enjoy it. I want people to be able to enjoy it. This is why people are spending the money. And I want to be able to do that. So I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out as well, because we mentioned the novel, the audiobook. Robert Petkoff does a wonderful job with these things. I do an annual radio show on Wisconsin Public Radio every Christmas. This year, we brought Robert into that broadcast and also brought January Lavoie, who did the audiobook for Die Standing, into that to talk about Star Trek audiobooks and what's involved in writing it and how things like the shorter chapters are actually driven by me being sensitive to the audiobook audience and also the audiobook narrators, because people are starting and stopping when they're reading a lot more. And we like to give people both places to pause and also reasons to go forward. And I'll do the next chapter. I'll do the next chapter. I'll do the next chapter. That really, I think, is something that, when I started this 8 years ago, Takedown doesn't have an audiobook. It's the only one of my Star Trek novels that doesn't have one. It wasn't a consideration then. But I do think that, knowing that that's out there has changed my game. And so I encourage anybody who goes to WPR.org, search my name, and then they'll find that and also my previous broadcasts, because it is a lot of fun. He was in studio at the time recording this audiobook when we did that broadcast. So we talk a bit about it, and literally it is after that broadcast that I said to Robert in January that it was a shame that nobody would get to see the maps. And they said, oh, yes, they can, because it is a thing that you can do. If you bought this book on Audible or anything else, you get the PDF. And nice. And it was on their advice that I wrote the folks at Simon & Schuster Audio and said, here, please, here's what I want to get in here. And at the top of the broadcast, or rather at the top of the recording, the very first thing you hear is him saying, there's this PDF which comes with this audiobook. Please only look at one map every time a new section starts, so that you don't spoil yourself. No, nobody will do it, but but that's the only way that we have to really sort of mimic the book, where we bury these other reveals further in.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know you'd be able to see the books with an audiobook. That's incredible. I didn't even know
if Google Play, you download the audiobook, and when you right click it, it says download attached PDF.
Well, I mean, I also thoroughly enjoyed it. we got an early copy of it, so I took time to read it before we recorded here. And, it was almost a year ago when we announced the book and it's finally here. So it's been exciting. I can't wait till the next one. I'm just going to assume there'll be a next one.
I appreciate it. It's these books, when I turned that in, I had many more readings ahead of me of it, because that's what we do. And I try to make them all different. I try to make them all different from the previous one. And, Enterprise War is a military science fiction novel. Die Standing is a spy novel. Rogue Elements is a caper novel to a degree, or a crime novel, if you want to call it that. This is a science fiction novel with horses.
Awesome. Well, are you able to let our listeners know about anything you're currently working on, Star Trek or otherwise?
What I can say is, that Skull and Bones comic book is coming out, video game or not, it's coming out, and that's a 3-issue series that has also been done for a long time. It is, again, something where, in that case, it's the fact that the video game was delayed that is why it hasn't come out yet. So there's that comes out March, April, May. I've been working on something non-fictional that is not announced. There's a non-fiction thing that has been announced, but I'm not sure still when it's coming out. There's a pair of books coming out from my friend Dr. Amy Sturgis and another professor named Emily Strand. These are scholarly books about Star Wars and Star Trek, and they asked me to just write a thing for each of them about tie-in fiction for them both and their relationship to canon. And I wrote both of these at the same time, and over the course of writing these, I realized that, wow, there are just so many ways that the story of Star Trek is impacted by the tie-in story of Star Wars, and vice versa. And where these franchises are responding to one another and reacting against one another sometimes. And, there is no coda probably without Legends over in Star Wars. And I interviewed David Mack extensively for these works. And so that's going to be 2 books. I don't even know what they're called yet, but when they come out, I recommend reading them both because we get into these things. The idea of the Keeper of the Holocron that we have over in Star Wars, really comes from Gene Roddenberry first, because he wanted DC Fontana in that position back in 1967 or 68 rather, but Paramount wouldn't fund it. March 14th, the Star Wars Knight Errant comics, the 3 graphic novels I did for that, come back into print from Marvel. It'll be the first time since 2014 that those will be in print again. That's going to be a book called Star Wars Epic Collection, The Old Republic, Volume 5. And that finally wraps up everything that I did for the Old Republic in 5 volumes. And anyway, in the meantime, people can find me farawaypress.com. Got behind the scenes notes on most of my older works there. Have not had time to do them on the Star Trek novels lately. I should just put links to the podcast there. Maybe I should do that. JJM Faraway is the handle on Twitter and post.news. And John Jackson Miller on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, I'll just say real quick that Knight Errant was the first Star Wars comic my youngest daughter ever read. So she got library. I remember her doing that. I was very happy about that. And now that the series Obi-Wan Kenobi came out, your novel Kenobi still works well with that. So
I was very happy about that. Yes, that was, and even happier that Ewan McGregor cut a video talking about it. That made me very, 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 very happy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to doing it again sometime, hopefully soonish. In the meantime, Bruce, where can people find you online? And also thank you for coming back on the show.
Oh, well, thanks for having me again. I had to come back for this one. So I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. Does anybody still use Twitter anymore? I don't know. And I'm on Facebook I'm out there on TikTok, but I hardly ever use that. And I'm also on Instagram, Admiral Rex with no underscore. And also, if you're in Atlanta, I'm in a sketch comedy show at the end of March with Sketchworks Productions. Look online for all the details.
Very cool. Awesome. You can find the podcast on Facebook, our Positively Trek discussion group. We'd love for you to join us there. positivelytrek@gmail.com if you'd like to reach out. We're also on Twitter at positivelytrek. Don't really interact a whole ton there. We just post new episodes and stuff. And we're also on Mastodon at positivelytrek@masthead.social, which is just a lovely, concise little thing. Anyway.
Which is rare for Mastodon.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We will see you in the next episode. Until then, as always, stay positive.